Besties. I was worried about Brian for a long time before he told me he was sick. When we'd go out to restaurants he would only eat a few bites of his food. His beer would remain mostly full and by the end of the meal he'd be offering it to me, asking if I wanted to finish it. Clothes started hanging off of him and his complexion became pale and deflated. Cheekbones sticking out at the sides of his usually rounded and rosy face. I'll admit I was afraid to question him about it. Chicken shit that I am. It took me months to say anything. Although I used the excuse later on that the change had been gradual and difficult to notice at first. How are you doing, man? I had asked him one day, sitting in his apartment. He gave a shrug and a non-committal alright, but I looked him in the eyes and pressed him for an answer. I mean, how are you really doing? Have you been to the doctor? By this point he couldn't play dumb. He had lost a lot of weight by then. He had just returned from the bathroom where the sounds of retching could be plainly heard through the door. Sighing, he looked at me with eyes that gave no indication of emotion, sadness or otherwise. It's stage 4. The big C. The shock I felt hearing it out loud surprised me. It wasn't real to me for several days, maybe even longer. Still, I comforted him as best I could. There's nothing good you can really say in these types of situations, but I tried anyways. I brought him his favorite meals after that, going to see him nearly every day. He said they gave him 3 months, maybe less. He didn't have the energy to do most of the things he had enjoyed before getting sick. Still, we went out and did a few things that he was feeling up to. We played pool and went to the movies, went bowling and to an arcade. Nothing seemed to cheer the poor guy up. Finally, I asked him a question that had been on my mind. I had seen an ad for the Make-A-Wish Foundation and thought it would be great if I could do something even remotely close to that for him. If you could have one wish, what would it be? I asked him, sitting at his dining room table one night eating his favorite Chinese takeout. He was picking at the food on his plate and barely touching it. His face actually perked up for a moment. Brian smiled for the first time I'd seen since him getting sick. Then his face dropped again and he looked even sadder than before. He shook his head. It wouldn't work. I couldn't ask that of you. Ask what? Come on. Just tell me. If I can do it for you, I will. Still, he hesitated, looking squeamish and uncomfortable. Come on, Brian. We've been best friends since elementary school. What the hell is it? Now I just need to know out of curiosity. No, I can't. You'd think I was nuts. You'd never look at me the same way. He must have seen the confused way I was looking at him and he said quickly, no, it's not that. I assured him that whatever it was, I would think no less of him. On top of that, I said I would agree to it, especially if it was so important to him. We were best friends, after all, like brothers. You promise? I promise. Okay, just close your eyes for a second. I was growing more and more perplexed, but said, sure, and did as he asked. The instant my eyes closed, I felt a rush of air as he came at me and wrapped his hands around my throat, beginning to strangle me violently. My eyes shot open and I looked to see him standing over me, tall and gaunt, smile brimming from ear to ear. I had never seen him so happy. Oh, man, thank you. I've always wanted to do this to somebody. Thank you so much. His grin widened further and he began to laugh as the world went red around the edges. I tried to ask him to stop but no words came out, only a wet, strangled sound. There was a mirror nearby and I could see my face in it. I could see by my reflection that I was starting to turn darker shades of red, then purple. My eyes were bulging and veins were popping out. My mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water. My hands tried to pry his away from my throat, but he had always been the stronger of the two of us. He was substantially larger than me. This feels so good. He was actually dancing now, jumping back and forth from foot to foot like a kid too excited to contain himself. Why have I never tried this before? This is better than anything. Man, I wish you could try this, but you probably wouldn't be into it. I shook my head back and forth and the blackness clouded my vision and then I began to slide out of the chair, my body going limp. My head landed hard against the floor and I vaguely remember feeling the relief of being able to breathe again, and being happy about that, before falling into unconsciousness. I woke up with my hands duct taped behind my back and a piece of it covering my mouth. Brian was standing over me a moment later. Oh, man, you woke up. Phew, you were looking pretty rough for a while there. Listen, I could tell you were pretty mad and, sure, yeah, I guess I would be too. So, I'm kinda worried you're gonna call the police now. My voice came out muffled through the duct tape which covered it. Yeah, so I was thinking, we're best friends, like you said, and you told me you would still be my best friend no matter what. Right. I nodded my head weakly, looking up at him and feeling like I was falling down a dark hole. Right. So I'm just gonna keep you here so we can hang out some more. Just for a few more days. Weeks. We'll play it by ear. I really don't want to spend my last few weeks on the planet in jail. And I'm kinda worried that's where I'll end up if I let you go. Shaking my head back and forth rapidly. I pleaded with my eyes for him to let me go. He didn't. The following weeks were a lesson in pain and in patience. It turned out all these years I had not known Brian very well at all. I thought we had no secrets from each other. But I discovered that some folks have urges so dark that they usually take them to their graves, unless someone pries them out with a metaphorical crowbar. As I had with Brian, I had practically begged him to play out his dark and horrifying fantasy. And once it was done, he discovered he needed that rush again. He went out and brought home more victims, who were not so lucky, homeless folks and independent sex workers. I discovered later on, by the time the police found me, following his confession, he was already dead in the hospital. He never served any jail time for what he did to me or to all of those other innocent people. I have bruising and scarring around my neck that will be discolored for the rest of my natural life. According to the doctors, therapists tell me to let it go. I've been to several of them. I have trust issues now. Go figure. Am I mad at him? Yes, of course I am. But the anger will fade over time. I'm sure. I could never stay mad at that guy.